The clouds hung heavy over Los Angeles that afternoon, the kind of rare, rainy day that made the city feel somehow smaller and more intimate. The steady drizzle had kept many shoppers away from West Side luxury motors, leaving the showroom quieter than usual. Glass walls showcased gleaming vehicles arranged under soft lighting, their polished surfaces reflecting the movement of the few sales associates who roamed the floor, checking their watches and straightening their ties. A bell chimed softly as the front door opened, letting in a gust of damp air and a solitary figure. The man who entered wasn't particularly noticeable at first glance. He wore faded jeans that had clearly seen better days, paired with a simple black jacket that hung loosely on his lean frame. His dark hair fell in messy strands past his ears, and several days' worth of stubble shadowed his face. He moved with an unhurried grace, stopping just inside the entrance to shake the rain from his jacket. Trevor Hansen, a sales associate who had been with West Side Luxury Motors for just over 2 years, quickly sized up the newcomer. The practiced smile he offered didn't quite reach his eyes as he approached the man, already mentally directing him toward the pre-owned section rather than the high-end models that formed the dealership's bread and butter. "Welcome to West Side," Trevor said, extending a hand. "Nasty weather we're having. Can I help you find something specific today?" The man's handshake was firm but not aggressive, his smile genuine if somewhat reserved. "Just browsing for now, thanks. Been thinking about upgrading my ride?" Trevor nodded, already guiding the visitor toward the back of the showroom, where the more affordable vehicles were displayed. "We've got some excellent certified pre-owned options that just came in. Great value, low mileage." If the man noticed the steering, he gave no indication. He simply followed Trevor, his eyes taking in the entire showroom with quiet interest. "Actually," he said after a moment, "I was hoping to look at some of your new models, too. Been doing some research online." Something in his voice, a gentle confidence perhaps, made Trevor pause. The sales associate recalibrated slightly, though his assessment of the man as an unlikely buyer remained. "Of course. Any particular make or features you're interested in?" "Something with good sustainability ratings," the man replied. "Maybe electric or at least hybrid, but still with decent performance." For the next half hour, the quiet visitor moved methodically through the showroom, asking surprisingly knowledgeable questions about engine specifications, carbon footprints, and safety features. He spoke softly but with clear purpose, never touching the vehicles without asking permission first. Trevor found himself actually engaging with the conversation despite his initial dismissal, answering questions about torque and battery capacity that most casual browsers wouldn't think to ask. The rain continued outside, drumming against the glass walls and ceiling. The few other customers had clustered around the more flashy sports cars, their excited chatter occasionally rising above the ambient music playing through hidden speakers. In contrast, the bearded man in the worn jacket moved with an almost meditative focus, seeming unbothered by the fact that Trevor occasionally glanced toward more promising prospects. "This one interests me," the man said eventually, stopping beside a top-tier luxury electric sedan with a price tag that would make most visitors wince. He ran his fingers lightly over the door handle, admiring the clean lines and minimalist design. "The specs on this are impressive." Trevor shifted his weight, the practiced smile returning. "It's one of our premium models. 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, range of nearly 400 miles, and interior material sourced from sustainable producers." He paused before adding, "It's been getting a lot of attention since it arrived on the floor." The man nodded, taking this in. "Would it be possible to sit inside? Maybe take it for a test drive if it's not too much trouble?" And there it was, the request Trevor had been expecting and mentally preparing to deflect. The dealership had strict policies about test drives for their high-end vehicles, policies that boiled down to weeding out the dreamers from the serious buyers. Trevor had become adept at spotting the difference. "Well," he began carefully, "test drives for our premium models typically require some paperwork and pre-approval. These vehicles represent significant investments, so we need to ensure we're working with serious buyers." If the visitor was offended by the implication, his face didn't show it. He simply nodded again, his expression thoughtful rather than disappointed. "I understand. It's a beautiful machine. If you'd like," Trevor offered, feeling oddly compelled to soften the rejection, "I can show you some of our other options that might be more accessible. Still great performance, but perhaps better aligned with different budget considerations." The man considered this for a moment, then smiled, a warm, genuine expression that momentarily transformed his tired features. Sure, I'd appreciate that, though I'm still interested in learning more about this one too. As they moved through the showroom, Trevor found himself increasingly puzzled by his quiet companion. The man didn't fit the profile of their usual clientele, the executives in tailored suits or the young tech moguls flashing their newfound wealth. Yet he asked questions that revealed a deep understanding of automotive engineering and showed particular interest in each vehicle's environmental impact. He was neither pushing to prove himself nor apologizing for his interest in the luxury models. Have you owned an electric vehicle before? Trevor asked during a lull in their conversation. The man shook his head. Not yet. I've been researching them for a while, though. The technology's finally where I'd want it to be for daily use, and there was something in his voice, a quiet thoughtfulness, that made even simple observations sound like they carried weight. By the time they had circled back to the front of the showroom, the rain had stopped and more customers were beginning to trickle in. A young couple entered, immediately drawing the attention of several sales associates with their designer outfits and the woman's prominently displayed handbag from a luxury brand. Appreciate you taking the time, the bearded visitor said, seeming to sense Trevor's divided attention. I think I've got a better sense of my options now. Trevor nodded, already half turned toward the newcomers. Of course. Feel free to continue looking around and let me know if you have any other questions. He handed the man a business card, the interaction already fading from his mind as he calculated the commission potential of the couple, now admiring a convertible sports car. Instead of leaving, however, the quiet visitor continued his methodical exploration of the showroom. Without Trevor's guidance, he gravitated back toward the high-end electric sedan that had first caught his interest. He circled it slowly, occasionally kneeling to examine details like the wheel design or the undercarriage profile. People came and went around him, most dressed in clothes that signaled their buying power much more explicitly than his rain-dampened jacket and worn jeans. Sales associates approached these promising customers with eager smiles, offering coffee or sparkling water, explaining financing options and special promotions. The bearded man remained largely invisible among them. His presence registered only when he occasionally stepped aside to let someone take a photo with a particularly eye-catching vehicle. He took his time unbothered by being overlooked, sometimes making notes on his phone or consulting what appeared to be research he'd saved earlier. After nearly an hour of this quiet browsing, he finally approached the financing desk where a woman with a sleek ponytail was typing on a computer. He waited patiently until she looked up, her professional smile flickering just briefly when she took in his casual appearance. Hi there, he said. I had some questions about purchasing options for one of your vehicles. The woman, her name tag identified her as Diane, nodded and gestured to the chair across from her desk. Of course. Which model were you interested in? The EV9 Touring, he replied, referring to the premium electric sedan he'd been examining. The midnight blue one on the main floor. Diane's fingers hesitated over her keyboard. The EV9 Touring, she repeated, her tone carefully neutral. That's one of our top-tier models. Were you looking at financing options or a potential lease arrangement? Actually, I was thinking about a straight purchase, the man said, his voice still carrying that same quiet confidence. But I'd be interested in hearing about your warranty coverage and any service packages you offer. Before Diane could respond, a tall man in an expensive suit approached the desk, his attention caught by the conversation. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his posture radiating authority as he placed a hand on the back of the visitor's chair. Is everything all right here, Diane? He asked, though his eyes were fixed on the casual visitor rather than his employee. Mr. Klein, Diane said, straightening slightly in her chair. This gentleman was asking about the EV9 Touring. Robert Klein, the senior sales manager at Westside Luxury Motors, studied the bearded man with undisguised skepticism. The visitor met his gaze calmly, neither challenging nor deferential. I see, Klein said finally. Sir, perhaps there's been some misunderstanding. The vehicle you're inquiring about represents a significant investment. It might be helpful if we discussed your specific needs and budget considerations to find something more suitable. The bearded man didn't immediately respond, his expression thoughtful as he absorbed the manager's words and their underlying meaning. Across the showroom, A young receptionist was staring in their direction, her brow furrowed in concentration as she studied the visitor's profile. She leaned over to whisper something to her colleague, who glanced up with sudden interest. The first woman quickly pulled out her phone, scrolling through something with increasing urgency. Meanwhile, Klein continued, his tone becoming more direct. "Sir, I don't think we have anything that matches your situation. Perhaps another dealership might better serve your needs." He gestured toward the exit, making his meaning unmistakable. Several customers nearby had turned to watch the interaction, some with uncomfortable expressions, others with the detached interest of those observing someone else's embarrassment from a safe distance. The bearded man rose slowly from his seat, his face betraying no anger or humiliation. He simply nodded once as if accepting an unavoidable conclusion. "Thank you for your time," he said quietly to Diane, who looked increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. Then, with a final glance at the midnight blue sedan that had caught his eye, he turned and walked toward the exit with unhurried steps. As the bearded man made his way across the polished floor toward the exit, the young receptionist who had been staring at him frantically tapped on her phone screen. Her eyes widened as she confirmed what she suspected, and she quickly showed her phone to her colleague. Both women looked up with expressions of disbelief, watching as the quiet visitor neared the glass doors. "Oh my God," the first receptionist whispered, her voice barely audible over the ambient music playing throughout the showroom. "It's really him." Her colleague squinted, tilting her head to see past a display stand. "Are you sure? He looks so normal." "I'm positive," the first woman insisted, already sliding out from behind her desk. "I've seen every movie he's ever made." Meanwhile, the man had reached the exit, his hand extending toward the door handle. The afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, sending streams of light across the showroom floor. Around him, the business of the dealership continued, sales associates chatting with well-dressed customers, the occasional sound of laughter, the gentle click of heels on the marble floor. Robert Klein, the sales manager who had just dismissed the casually dressed visitor, had already turned away, straightening his tie as he prepared to greet a couple who had arrived in a luxury SUV. Success in his business was about focusing on promising prospects, and he had long ago learned to spot the difference between dreamers and buyers, or so he thought. The receptionist was now moving with surprising speed across the showroom, her phone clutched in one hand as she navigated between display vehicles. "Mr. Klein," she called out, her voice higher than usual with urgency. "Mr. Klein, wait!" The manager turned, his expression a mixture of surprise and irritation at being interrupted. "What is it, Allison?" "I'm about to greet the Hendersons." Allison reached him, slightly out of breath, and thrust her phone toward him. "Look," she said quietly, glancing over her shoulder to where the bearded man was just pushing open the door. "That's Keanu Reeves." Klein stared at the screen, which showed a recent photo of the famous actor at a movie premiere. He looked back up at the departing figure, the realization dawning on his face like a slow-motion car crash. The resemblance was undeniable. The same thoughtful eyes, the same angular features partially hidden behind the casual beard. Even the way he moved had that distinctive grace that millions of moviegoers would recognize. "You're sure?" he asked, though the question was merely a formality. His complexion had already paled considerably. Allison nodded. 100%. "He's been in here for almost 2 hours, and you just—" She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air between them. Klein didn't respond. Instead, he handed the phone back to Allison and straightened his jacket with a quick, nervous gesture. "The Hendersons," he said distantly. "Tell them I'll be with them shortly." Without waiting for her response, he turned and moved quickly toward the exit, weaving between vehicles with the determined stride of a man, trying to outrun his own mistake. The glass doors were already swinging closed as he reached them, and he pushed through with enough force that they banged against their frames. Outside, the parking lot glistened with puddles from the recent rain. The bearded man, Keanu Reeves, international film star and cultural icon, was walking unhurriedly toward a motorcycle parked in a far corner of the lot. Unlike the flashy sports cars that dominated the spaces near the entrance, the bike was practical and understated, much like its owner. "Sir," Klein called out, his voice echoing slightly in the open air. "Sir, please wait." Reeves paused, turning with a look of mild surprise. He made no attempt to either approach or retreat, simply waiting as the sales manager jogged toward him, dress shoes splashing through puddles with little regard for their Italian leather. "I need to apologize," Klein said as soon as he was within conversational distance, his breath coming fast. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding." Reeves tilted his head slightly, studying the manager with those same thoughtful eyes that had captivated audiences in dozens of films. "It's really not necessary," he said, his voice carrying that distinctive gentle tone that somehow made even simple phrases sound meaningful. "No, it absolutely is," Klein insisted, running a hand through his silver hair, disheveling its perfect arrangement. "I had no idea who you were. Not that it should matter, of course," he added quickly. "We should treat all our customers with the same respect regardless of who they are. That's our policy. That's always been our policy." The actor's expression remained neutral, neither accepting the apology nor rejecting it outright. Around them, the sounds of the city provided a backdrop. Distant traffic, birds returning after the rain, the occasional horn from the nearby boulevard. "Look," Klein continued, filling the silence, "I can't apologize enough. If you'll come back inside, I'd be more than happy to personally show you any vehicle you're interested in. The EV9 Touring is an exceptional machine. We could arrange a test drive immediately, no paperwork needed. Or perhaps you'd prefer something even more exclusive. We have several limited production models in our private showroom." Reeves listened to this rush of words with patience, his eyes occasionally shifting to observe a bird hopping between puddles nearby, or the way the sunlight was creating small rainbows in the water droplets clinging to the parked cars. When Klein finally ran out of steam, the actor simply shook his head. "I appreciate the offer," he said quietly, "but I think there's been a misunderstanding on both sides." Klein blinked, caught off guard by this response. "Both sides?" Reeves nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I wasn't expecting special treatment. Just came in to look at cars, same as anyone else." He gestured vaguely toward the dealership. "Your associate Trevor was helpful. Showed me around, answered my questions. It was only when I approached the financing desk that things got complicated." The manager winced visibly at this gentle assessment. "That's entirely on me. I made assumptions I shouldn't have. The way you were dressed." He stopped, realizing he was only digging himself deeper. A small smile appeared on Reeves's face, not mocking, but genuinely amused. "I've been filming in the desert for the past 3 months. Haven't had much reason to dress up." He glanced down at his worn jeans and faded jacket. "Plus, these are comfortable." This simple explanation, delivered without defensiveness or accusation, seemed to hit Klein harder than any angry response might have. Here was a man who could afford any vehicle in the showroom many times over, who was recognized and admired worldwide, explaining why he was wearing comfortable clothes as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Of course," Klein said, the words feeling inadequate. "Absolutely. Comfort is important." An awkward silence fell between them. In the distance, the dealership's glass walls reflected the emerging sunlight, turning the building into a gleaming beacon of luxury and aspiration. Several faces were visible through the windows, watching the interaction in the parking lot with undisguised curiosity. "I should get going," Reeves said finally, gesturing toward his motorcycle. "Thanks for coming out to talk to me. I appreciate it." The idea that this celebrity was thanking him after being essentially thrown out of the dealership left Klein momentarily speechless. His carefully cultivated sales persona, honed over decades in the luxury automotive industry, had completely abandoned him. In its place was something far more rare in his profession: genuine regret. "Before you go," he managed, "can I ask you something? Why didn't you just tell us who you were? Things would have been very different." Reeves considered the question, his eyes drifting toward the horizon where the clouds were breaking apart to reveal patches of blue sky. When he looked back at Klein, there was something in his expression that made the manager feel as though he was being truly seen for the first time that day. "I've found," Reeves said slowly, "that how people treat you when they don't know who you are says a lot more than how they treat you when they do." The simplicity of this statement, delivered without judgment or rancor, left Klein standing frozen in place. It wasn't an accusation, yet it cut through years of professional conditioning and laid bare a truth he had long ignored in his climb to success. "I understand," the manager said quietly, and for perhaps the first time that day he actually did. Reeves nodded, seeming to recognize the sincerity in Klein's response. He extended his hand, the same hand that Trevor had shaken earlier without recognizing its owner. No hard feelings. Life's too short. Klein shook the offered hand, noticing the strength in the grip despite its gentleness. Would you, he began, then hesitated, unsure if he had the right to ask anything of this man. Would you consider giving us another chance? Not as Keanu Reeves, the actor, but as a customer who deserves our respect regardless of who he is or what he's wearing? Something shifted in Reeves's expression. A subtle lightening, perhaps, or a hint of consideration where before there had been polite finality. He didn't answer immediately, instead looking back toward the dealership with its gleaming vehicles and watching staff. The midnight blue EV9, he said after a moment. It really is a beautiful machine. Been researching it for months. Hope flared in Klein's chest. It is. Finest electric vehicle we've ever carried. The attention to detail is extraordinary. I might come back tomorrow, Reeves said, the words offered not as a promise but as a possibility. If I do, I'll probably still be wearing these jeans. A smile broke across Klein's face. Not the practiced sales floor smile he had perfected over the years, but something more genuine and human. I'd expect nothing less, he said. And I'd be honored to help you personally, jeans and all. Reeves nodded once more, a gesture that somehow conveyed both conclusion and acceptance. He turned and continued toward his motorcycle, leaving the manager standing amid the puddles, the afternoon sun warming his back as he watched one of Hollywood's most beloved stars casually mount a bike that probably cost less than the monthly lease on most vehicles in his showroom. As the motorcycle's engine came to life with a gentle purr, Klein realized that he'd just been given something far more valuable than a high commission sale. He'd been offered a second chance not just at business, but at remembering what truly mattered beyond the polished surfaces and price tags that had defined his professional life for so long. The motorcycle pulled away, its rider giving a small wave without looking back. Klein lifted his hand in response, though he knew Reeves probably didn't see it. The gesture wasn't really for the actor anyway. It was a silent acknowledgement of a lesson that had been a long time coming. The next morning arrived with clear skies and golden sunshine that seemed to wash away all traces of yesterday's rain. At West Side Luxury Motors, Robert Klein had arrived earlier than usual, his typical confidence replaced by an unfamiliar nervousness. He'd spent a restless night replaying his interaction with Keanu Reeves, each recollection bringing fresh waves of embarrassment. "You're here early," commented Diane as she passed his office, coffee in hand. "Big day?" Klein looked up from the documents he'd been pretending to review. "Just catching up on some paperwork." He hesitated, then added, "Have the staff been talking much about yesterday's incident?" Diane's expression told him everything he needed to know. It might have come up in conversation, she admitted. Allison showed everyone the pictures on her phone. "Hard to believe we had Keanu Reeves in here and treated him like that." "Yes, well," Klein said, straightening papers that were already perfectly aligned. "That's exactly what we need to address. I've called a staff meeting before we open. 9 o'clock sharp in the conference room." Word spread quickly through the dealership, and by 9, every employee had gathered in the glass-walled conference room at the back of the building. The usual morning chatter about traffic and coffee orders was replaced by excited speculation about yesterday's famous visitor. Trevor, the sales associate who had first greeted Reeves, sat looking somewhat shell-shocked, repeatedly telling anyone who would listen that the actor had seemed like a regular guy, and asked really good questions about torque ratios. Klein entered the room precisely at 9, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. The conversations immediately died down as all eyes turned toward him. For a man who typically commanded rooms with ease, he looked uncharacteristically subdued. "Good morning, everyone," he began, remaining standing at the head of the table. "I'm sure you've all heard about our visitor yesterday afternoon." He paused, meeting the eyes of various staff members around the table. "For those who haven't, we had the privilege of having Keanu Reeves in our showroom, and I didn't recognize him and treated him poorly." A few uncomfortable glances were exchanged around the table. "Mr. Reeves mentioned he might return today," Klein continued. "But whether he does or not, yesterday's incident has made me realize we need to make some changes in how we operate." Trevor raised his hand hesitantly. "Sir, if I may, I spent almost an hour with him before you. I mean, before the misunderstanding. He never once mentioned who he was or tried to get special treatment. He just asked regular questions about the cars. Exactly, Klein nodded. And that's the point I want to make today. We're in the business of selling luxury vehicles, but that doesn't mean we should only be luxurious to people who look like they can afford what we're selling. He moved to the whiteboard at the side of the room and picked up a marker. From today, we implement a new policy. Every customer gets the same level of service, regardless of what they're wearing or how they arrived at our dealership. Allison, the receptionist who had recognized Reeves, raised her hand. But Mr. Klein, you've always told us to focus our attention on serious buyers. How do we know who those are if not by how they present themselves? It was a fair question, and one that Klein himself would have argued strongly for just 24 hours earlier. Now he found himself seeing it through a different lens. That's the old way of thinking, he admitted. My way of thinking until yesterday. But consider this. Keanu Reeves, who could buy every car in this showroom without blinking, walked in wearing worn jeans and a faded jacket. Meanwhile, how many times have we rolled out the red carpet for someone in an expensive suit who ended up wasting our time? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. The truth is, Klein continued, writing on the whiteboard as he spoke, we can't judge who's a serious buyer by appearances. From now on, we judge by interest, by questions, by engagement. If someone is genuinely interested in our vehicles, they deserve our full attention, whether they're wearing ripped jeans or a $1,000 suit. The staff meeting continued for another 20 minutes, with Klein outlining specific changes to their approach. No more steering casually dressed visitors to the pre-owned section without asking their preferences. No more requiring pre-approval for test drives based on appearance. No more hovering near the expensive handbags while ignoring the worn backpacks. As the meeting concluded and staff dispersed to prepare for opening, Diane lingered behind. That was quite a change of philosophy, she observed, helping gather the meeting notes. Keanu Reeves must have said something pretty impressive in that parking lot. Klein paused, remembering the actor's words. How people treat you when they don't know who you are says a lot more than how they treat you when they do. Such a simple statement, yet it had kept him awake half the night. He didn't say much, Klein admitted, but what he did say, it made me think about who I've become in this business. And I didn't particularly like the answer. The dealership opened at 10, and the morning proceeded with the usual flow of customers, some serious, some just dreaming. But there was a subtle difference in how the staff interacted with everyone who walked through the door. The young couple in casual clothes who might have been quickly dismissed the day before were given a thorough tour of the main showroom. The older gentleman in paint-splattered work clothes was offered coffee and invited to sit in the driver's seat of the vehicle he was admiring. By early afternoon, Klein had almost convinced himself that Reeves wouldn't return. It had been a polite maybe, a gentle way to end an uncomfortable conversation. He couldn't blame the actor being dismissed from a business establishment, was humiliating enough without having to face the same people again. He was reviewing sales figures in his office when Allison's voice came over the intercom. Mr. Klein, you have a visitor at the front desk. His heart jumped unexpectedly as he stood straightening his tie out of habit. When he reached the reception area, he saw him immediately, Keanu Reeves, standing quietly near the entrance, wearing the same worn jeans as yesterday and a different but equally casual jacket. True to his word. Unlike yesterday, however, several customers and staff had recognized him. A small cluster of people had gathered nearby, trying to appear casual while stealing glances in his direction. Reeves seemed unbothered by the attention, his gaze focused on a display about the dealership's history mounted on the wall. Mr. Reeves, Klein greeted him, extending his hand. Thank you for coming back. The actor turned and shook his hand with that same gentle firmness from yesterday. Said I might, he replied with a small smile. Still interested in that EV9? Of course, Klein nodded, gesturing toward the showroom floor. Would you like to pick up where you left off yesterday? I believe you were asking about warranty options and service packages. That'd be great, Reeves said, falling into step beside the manager. As they walked, he added quietly, Appreciate you coming out to the parking lot yesterday. You didn't have to do that. Actually, I did, Klein replied with newfound sincerity, and not because of who you are, because it was the right thing to do after how I behaved. Something in Reeves's expression suggested he recognized the truth in these words. He nodded slightly. a gesture of acknowledgement rather than agreement or disagreement. They reached the midnight blue electric sedan that had first caught the actor's eye. In the bright showroom lighting, its curve seemed even more elegant than the day before. "We made some changes this morning," Klein said as Reeves walked slowly around the vehicle. "New customer service policy. Everyone gets the same treatment, regardless of what they're wearing or how they arrive." Reeves looked up, his expression thoughtful. "Because of yesterday?" "Because of yesterday," Klein confirmed. "Sometimes we need a mirror held up to see ourselves clearly. You did that, though I don't think you meant to." The actor ran his fingers lightly over the car's smooth surface, considering this. "We all need that sometimes," he said finally, "seeing ourselves through someone else's eyes." For the next hour, they discussed the vehicle in detail, its performance capabilities, the environmental impact, the user interface. Reeves asked insightful questions that revealed both his technical knowledge and his practical concerns as a potential owner. Not once did he mention his celebrity status or expect special accommodation. Other customers continued to recognize him, some approaching hesitantly for autographs or photos. Each time, Reeves responded with gentle patience, signing papers or posing for quick pictures before returning his attention to the vehicle discussion. Klein found himself impressed not just by the actor's humility, but by his focus. He was genuinely there to consider purchasing a car, not to make a point or create a scene. When they finally sat down at Diane's desk to discuss specifics, Reeves pulled out a small notebook where he'd jotted down questions and considerations. The sight of this simple analog approach from someone who could have assistance handling every detail of his life struck Klein as both surprising and somehow perfectly in character with everything he'd observed so far. "I'd like to test drive it, if that's possible," Reeves said after they'd covered the financing options. "Need to feel how it handles before making a decision." "Absolutely," Klein nodded, reaching for the necessary forms. "We just need some basic information for insurance purposes." As he slid the paperwork across the desk, he added, "And just so you know, this is the same process we'd use for any customer now. No special treatment even for—" He caught himself, realizing he was about to say even for celebrities, even for returning visitors. A small smile touched Reeves's lips. "Good policy," he said simply, beginning to fill out the form with careful handwriting. Outside, the California sun had reached its peak, bathing the showroom in warm light that made every vehicle gleam. Through the glass walls, life continued on the busy boulevard. People hurrying to appointments, couples strolling hand in hand, delivery drivers navigating traffic. Inside, something subtle but significant had shifted in the atmosphere of West Side Luxury Motors. It wasn't just that Keanu Reeves was sitting at a financing desk filling out paperwork. It was that, for perhaps the first time since the dealership had opened its doors, the value of a person who walked through those doors was being measured by something other than the contents of their wallet or the label on their clothes. As Klein watched, Reeves complete the forms with the same focused attention he gave to everything. He realized that the actor had given him something far more valuable than a high commission sale or a celebrity endorsement. He had given him a chance to remember what truly mattered in business and perhaps in life itself. The midnight blue EV9 purred quietly as it glided out of the dealership lot with Keanu Reeves behind the wheel and Robert Klein in the passenger seat. Unlike the typical test drive route that kept customers on busy commercial streets, where the vehicle's acceleration could hardly be tested, Klein had suggested they take the car into the nearby hills where its handling could be properly experienced. "Take a left at the next light," Klein directed. "There's a nice stretch of road that winds up toward the canyon. Good curves, minimal traffic." Reeves nodded, handling the car with the easy confidence of someone who had driven many different vehicles over the years. His hands rested lightly on the steering wheel as he navigated through the last of the city traffic, before reaching the more open roads that led toward the hills. "What do you think of the responsiveness?" Klein asked as they began to climb. Reeves considered this, taking a sharp curve with smooth precision. "It's balanced," he said after a moment. "Lighter than I expected for a car this size. Feels connected to the road." The way he described it wasn't with the technical vocabulary of a car enthusiast, but with the thoughtful assessment of someone who understood that driving was about more than just specifications on a page. Klein found himself nodding in agreement. That was one of the design priorities, he explained, relaxing into the comfortable passenger seat. They wanted an electric vehicle that didn't feel like you were piloting a computer. Something with soul. They succeeded, Reeves said, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he accelerated out of a curve. The car responded instantly, the electric motors delivering torque with none of the delay of a traditional engine. They drove in companionable silence for several minutes, the city falling away below them as they climbed higher into the hills. The road narrowed and twisted more dramatically, offering glimpses of the ocean in the distance through gaps in the trees and rocky outcroppings. "Mind if I ask you something?" Klein said eventually, breaking the quiet. Reeves glanced over briefly. "Sure. When you came into the dealership yesterday, were you actually planning to buy a car, or were you just browsing?" It was a question that had been nagging at Klein since their parking lot conversation. Part of him wondered if the actor had simply been killing time, wandering into the dealership on a whim during a rainy afternoon. "Been researching this model for months," Reeves replied, his eyes on the road. "My current car is getting old. Wanted something more environmentally responsible." He navigated around a tight corner, the car hugging the road perfectly. "When I saw the weather clearing yesterday, thought it would be a good time to check it out in person. Less crowded on rainy days." The simple practicality of this explanation struck Klein as both completely believable and somewhat humbling. Here was a man who could afford any vehicle, choosing his car shopping time based on when the dealership might be quieter, just like any ordinary person who disliked crowds. "You know," Klein said, looking out at the view, "most celebrities who come into our showroom have their assistants call ahead. They arrange private viewings, special treatment. Some send their staff to do the entire purchase for them." Reeves shrugged slightly. "Never been comfortable with all that. Just a person looking for a car." They reached a scenic overlook, a small paved area at the side of the road where visitors could pull over to admire the panoramic view of the city and ocean below. Without being asked, Reeves eased the car to a stop in the empty parking area. For a moment, they sat in silence, taking in the vast expanse of blue ocean meeting blue sky at the horizon. The city sprawled between the hills and the shoreline. From this distance, the urban landscape looked peaceful, the chaotic tangle of human activity reduced to a geometric pattern of buildings and streets. "Beautiful up here," Reeves commented, his gaze taking in the view with genuine appreciation. "I come up here sometimes to clear my head," Klein admitted. "When the dealership feels too, I don't know, artificial maybe." Reeves nodded as if he understood perfectly, though his world of film sets and press junkets was vastly different from Klein's world of sales targets and commission structures. "Been thinking about what you said yesterday," Klein continued, surprising himself with his candor, "about how people treat you when they don't know who you are versus when they do." Reeves acknowledged, waiting for him to continue. "It's stuck with me because I recognize myself in it. I've spent 20 years in this business training myself to sort people the moment they walk through the door. Designer watch, full attention. Worn-out sneakers, direct them to the pre-owned section." He shook his head. "Yesterday made me realize how much I might have missed because of that habit." The actor turned slightly in his seat, studying Klein with those thoughtful eyes that seemed to take in everything without judgment. "Hard habit to break," he offered. "We all do it in different ways, even you." Klein couldn't help asking. A flicker of something crossed Reeves's face. Perhaps amusement, perhaps something more complicated. "Especially me," he said quietly. "In my line of work, people have decided who you are before you ever meet them. They've seen you as a hero, a villain, a lover, a fighter. They think they know you, and they don't. They know a projection," Reeves said, his gaze returning to the view. "An image on a screen that looks like me but isn't really me at all." He paused. "That's why normal moments matter. Just being a person buying a car, riding a subway, standing in line for coffee." Klein considered this, seeing for the first time what fame might actually feel like from the inside. Not the glamorous fantasy most people imagined, but something more complex and potentially isolating. "So yesterday, Klein began. "When you saw someone who didn't fit your idea of a serious customer," Reeves finished for him, without rancor. "Yes." Klein nodded. "I was doing exactly what you try to escape, judging based on appearance instead of seeing the person." Reeves didn't confirm or deny this assessment. Instead, he put the car back in drive and carefully pulled back onto the winding road. As they began their descent toward the city, he said simply, "We all want to be seen for who we are, not what we look like or what we do for a living." The rest of the drive back to the dealership was quiet, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It felt more like a shared understanding, two men from very different worlds finding an unexpected common ground. Reeves handled the vehicle with relaxed skill, testing its braking and acceleration on the downhill stretches, while Klein pointed out features they hadn't covered during their earlier discussion. As they pulled back into the dealership lot, a small crowd had gathered near the entrance. Word had clearly spread about the famous visitor, and several people had smartphones ready, hoping to catch a photo or video of the actor. "Sorry about that," Klein said, gesturing toward the onlookers. "Word travels fast." Reeves shrugged slightly as he brought the car to a perfect stop in its designated space. "Comes with the territory," he said, though Klein thought he detected a hint of resignation beneath the acceptance. They exited the vehicle, and Klein noticed how Reeves took a moment to run his hand along the car's sleek roof one last time. A gesture of genuine appreciation, rather than the showy enthusiasm some customers displayed when considering expensive purchases. "So, what do you think?" Klein asked as they walked back toward the showroom, conscious of the eyes watching them. "Does the EV9 meet your expectations?" Reeves nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It feels right," he said simply. "Good balance between performance and conscience." Inside, several staff members were trying very hard to look busy, while obviously keeping an eye on the returning test drivers. Diane had cleared her desk, obviously anticipating that they might be ready to proceed with paperwork. "Would you like some time to think about it?" Klein asked, deliberately avoiding the high-pressure closing techniques he typically employed with customers who showed serious interest after a test drive. "Or perhaps you'd like to try another model for comparison." Reeves shook his head. "Don't need more time," he said. "Been thinking about this for months, like I said." He glanced back toward the midnight blue sedan visible through the showroom windows. "That's the one." The simplicity of his decision-making process was refreshing in a world where customers often dragged out purchases with endless deliberations and negotiations. Klein led him to Diane's desk, where she had already prepared the preliminary paperwork for a potential sale. "Mr. Reeves has decided to purchase the EV9 Touring," Klein told her. "The midnight blue model he just test drove." Diane's professional composure slipped just slightly, her eyes widening with excitement before she regained her calm demeanor. "Excellent choice," she said, pulling out the necessary forms. "I'll just need some additional information to complete the sale." As Reeves settled into the chair across from her desk, Klein placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "I'll give you some space to handle the details," he said. "But I wanted to thank you not just for your business, but for the lesson you didn't intend to teach yesterday." Reeves looked up, his expression questioning. "Sometimes," Klein continued, lowering his voice, "we need someone to hold up a mirror so we can see ourselves clearly. You did that for me and for this dealership. I won't forget it." The actor seemed momentarily taken aback by this earnest acknowledgement. Then a warm smile spread across his face. Not the practiced smile of a celebrity posing for cameras, but something genuine and human. "We're all just figuring it out as we go," he said quietly. "All of us." With a final nod, Klein stepped away, allowing Diane to guide Reeves through the purchasing process. As he walked back to his office, he noticed something had shifted in the atmosphere of the dealership. Staff members were engaging more naturally with all customers, regardless of their appearance. Trevor was patiently explaining features to an elderly couple who had likely been overlooked on previous visits. Allison was offering coffee to a young man in paint-splattered work clothes who had wandered in during his lunch break. Small changes, perhaps, but meaningful ones. And all because a famous actor had walked in wearing worn jeans and hadn't announced who he was, had simply asked to be treated like anyone else deserved to be treated. From his office window, Klein could see Reeves still sitting at Diane's desk, filling out paperwork with that same focused attention he seemed to bring to everything. There was a lesson there too, Klein thought, about being fully present in even mundane moments, about treating ordinary interactions with the same care as extraordinary ones. It was a lesson he intended to remember long after the excitement of having a Hollywood star in the showroom had faded. 3 weeks had passed since Keanu Reeves had walked into Westside Luxury Motors on that rainy afternoon. The story had spread through the dealership and beyond, shared in hushed tones among staff, whispered to friends over dinner, eventually reaching the ears of other businesses in the area. The tale of how one of Hollywood's most beloved actors had been dismissed because of his casual appearance, only to return with quiet grace the next day, had become something of a local legend. For Robert Klein, the experience had sparked more than just an amusing anecdote to share. It had triggered a genuine shift in how he approached his work and the people he encountered each day. On this particular morning, Klein arrived at the dealership to find an unusual visitor waiting in the reception area, an older gentleman in faded overalls and work boots, his hands bearing the calluses of someone who had spent decades in physical labor, the kind of visitor who just a month ago might have been politely but firmly directed elsewhere. "Good morning," Klein greeted him warmly. "Welcome to Westside. Can I help you with something today?" The man stood wiping his palms on his overalls before extending a weathered hand. "Name's Frank Henderson," he said, his grip firm and steady. "I'm here about the electric car." "Which model were you interested in?" Klein asked, genuinely curious. "The one that actor bought," Frank said directly. "Heard about it from my grandson. He works at the coffee shop down the street. Said the whole story's been going around. How you threw out Keanu Reeves because of how he was dressed, then changed your ways when you found out who he was." Klein felt a flush of embarrassment creep up his neck. Of course, the story had spread beyond the dealership. It was too good not to share. "That's a simplified version of what happened," he admitted. "But yes, Mr. Reeves did purchase our EV9 touring model." Frank nodded, his eyes sharp beneath bushy gray eyebrows. "Never been much for fancy cars myself. Drove the same pickup for 27 years. But I've been reading about these electric ones, thinking about the air my great-grandkids are going to breathe someday." "Would you like to see the EV9? Klein offered. "I'd be happy to show you its features." "Don't want to waste your time," Frank said bluntly. "I know what these cars cost. Probably not in my budget. Just came to see if the story was true, if places like this are really changing how they size people up." The honesty caught Klein off guard. A month ago, he might have found a polite way to end the conversation with someone who openly admitted they probably couldn't afford his products. Today, he found himself genuinely wanting to continue the discussion. "Why don't we find out?" he suggested. "I'd be happy to show you our full range, including some more accessible options. No pressure, no assumptions." Frank studied him for a moment as if trying to detect any hint of condescension. Finding none, he nodded. "Got an hour before my next job. Show me what you got." For the next 45 minutes, Klein gave Frank the same comprehensive tour he would offer any serious customer. He explained the differences between the various electric and hybrid models, discussed battery technology and charging infrastructure, and answered Frank's surprisingly knowledgeable questions about torque and power management. "You know a lot about engines," Klein observed as they examined the motor compartment of a mid-range hybrid. "Been a mechanic most of my life," Frank explained. "Started with carburetors and distributors. All this new tech is different, but the principles haven't changed much. It's still about converting energy to motion as efficiently as possible." By the time they reached the end of their tour, Klein had developed a genuine respect for the older man's practical wisdom and straightforward manner. Frank clearly wasn't going to purchase a luxury vehicle today, but the conversation had been valuable nonetheless. "Thanks for your time," Frank said as they returned to the reception area. "Gave me some things to think about." "It was my pleasure," Klein replied, and meant it. "And if you do decide to make the switch to electric someday, we'd be happy to help you find the right fit, whether it's one of our vehicles or something else entirely." Frank nodded, a hint of surprise in his expression. "You know," he said, "my grandson was right. Something did change around here." With a final handshake, he headed for the exit, pausing at the door to add, "Keanu Reeves did you a favor, showing up looking like a regular Joe. Best lesson a place like this could get." As the door closed behind Frank, Klein found himself standing in the same spot where 3 weeks earlier he had watched Reeves walk out after being dismissed. "The parallel wasn't lost on him, Mr. Klein." Allison approached with a tablet in hand. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you should see." She handed him the tablet, which displayed a local business news website. The headline immediately caught his attention. "Hollywood star's car purchase leads to culture shift at luxury dealership." "It just posted this morning," Allison explained. Someone must have talked to a reporter. Klein scanned the article, which told a somewhat dramatized version of what had happened with Reeves. It described how the actor had been thrown out of the dealership because of his casual appearance, only to return and purchase a vehicle the next day. The piece went on to detail the changes in customer service policies that had followed, quoting an anonymous employee who described it as a complete transformation in how we treat people. Great, Klein sighed. Now everyone's going to think we only changed because a celebrity caught us being snobs. Isn't that kind of what happened? Allison asked carefully. Klein looked up, considering her question. Yes and no, he said finally. It took someone like Reeves to make me see what was happening, but the change isn't about him. It's about recognizing that we were missing something important by judging people so quickly. Before Allison could respond, the front door opened again, and a young couple entered. They were dressed casually in jeans and t-shirts, looking somewhat hesitant as they took in the luxury vehicles gleaming under the showroom lights. I'll handle this, Klein said, handing the tablet back to Allison. He approached the couple with a genuine smile. Welcome to Westside. I'm Robert. How can I help you today? The young man glanced at his companion before responding. We're probably just looking. We saw the article about what happened with Keanu Reeves here and, well, we've been saving for our first new car. Wanted to see what options might be in our future, even if we're not quite there yet. Of course, Klein nodded. Everyone starts somewhere. Why don't I show you around and you can tell me what features matter most to you? As he guided them through the showroom, Klein realized that the article, however embellished, might actually bring in people who would never have considered stepping foot in a luxury dealership before. Not all of them would become customers today, but some might return in the future. More importantly, each person who walked through those doors now had the chance to be seen as an individual, rather than being sorted into promising or not promising categories at first glance. By late afternoon, the article had been shared widely on social media, bringing a steady stream of curious visitors to the dealership. Some came just to see where the famous encounter had taken place, while others were genuinely interested in the vehicles. Trevor and the other sales associates adapted admirably, treating each visitor with the same attentive respect, regardless of their appearance or obvious buying potential. As closing time approached, Klein stood at the back of the showroom observing the final customers of the day. The mix was noticeably different from their typical clientele, more diverse in age, dress, and demeanor. Yet the atmosphere felt more authentic somehow, less like a stage where both customers and staff were playing assigned roles. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unfamiliar number. Opening it, he found a single line of text. Heard about the article. Glad something good came from our meeting. K.R. Klein stared at the message, wondering how Reeves had gotten his number, before remembering that the actor had filled out contact forms during his purchase. After a moment's thought, he typed a simple reply. Thank you for the unintended lesson. It changed more than just a policy. The response came almost immediately. The best lessons are often unplanned. Enjoying the car, by the way. Smiling to himself, Klein pocketed his phone and walked toward his office. The showroom windows reflected the golden light of the setting sun, turning the space into a warm, glowing sanctuary. Outside, the world continued its busy pace, people hurrying home after work, couples meeting for dinner, parents picking up children from activities, all of them with their own stories, their own dreams and struggles, all of them deserving to be seen as more than what they wore or drove or carried. It seemed so obvious now, but it had taken a chance encounter with a humble Hollywood star to make the truth of it sink in. On his desk, Klein found a handwritten note from Frank Henderson, the mechanic who had visited that morning. It contained a phone number and a brief message. If you're serious about helping regular folks go electric, call me. I know plenty of people who care about the planet but can't afford fancy showrooms. Maybe we could figure something out. Klein picked up the note, turning it over in his hands thoughtfully. There was potential here, not just for sales, but for something more meaningful. A genuine connection to a community of people he had previously overlooked. As he prepared to leave for the day, Klein took one last look around the dealership. The place was the same. Same gleaming cars, same polished floors, same elegant lighting. But something fundamental had shifted, and it had all begun with a simple moment of recognition. Seeing a person for who they were, rather than what they appeared to be. In the parking lot, he paused beside his own car, looking up at the evening sky where the first stars were becoming visible. Somewhere in this same city, Keanu Reeves was probably driving his new midnight blue EV9, blending in with traffic, just another person making his way home. The thought made Klein smile. Some lessons came from unexpected teachers. And sometimes the most powerful statement a famous person could make was simply to ask to be treated like anyone else.